Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about my Section 3 book, which was written by children's book author Ben Clayton, and it's entitled Narwhal, Unicorn of the Sea. This book is a fiction children's book with touches of nonfiction information. The story unfolds panel by panel, making it seem like a graphic novel, but I would also classify this book in the realm of fantasy because the characters portray real-world animals acting in unreal ways, such as talking, handling items, and eating waffles. The charm and easy read of this book comes through my overall evaluation that this book is not ever too overly in-depth about any one thing. The short and concise, and at times limited text, allows the illustrations to take off some of the weight from the written words. Even when the fun fact page is presented, it exists as a single page, front and back, with 4 to 5 facts on each page and a bit of dialogue. The range for this book is intended for children from about 2nd grade to maybe 4th or 5th grade, or 8 to 11 to 12 years old. The simplistic, hand-drawn art style is easy to digest and accept at face value, making it accessible for 2nd graders. But for older students, they'd be better suited to pick up on the nonverbal information that is communicated through the pure expressions in the illustrations. There's also concepts and words that occur in this book that older students would benefit and understand it better, such as the idea of pods in relation to animals such as narwhals. It offers good surface knowledge when it is presented, and the stories are based on single events each time, where the real interpretation of what the text is saying comes in the form of drawn expression from the characters. This book has 3 short stories with a page of fun facts about narwhals and jellyfish, then later a page with a narwhal song on it. These 2 pages are nestled between each one of the 3 stories and allow a clean, distinct break between stories while providing more entertaining content. The first story introduces us to the characters, Narwhal the Narwhal and Jelly the Jellyfish. And it also introduces these characters to each other, and it opens up the door for a little bit of banter between these 2 different types of personalities, and they are very different. The personality characteristics of these sea creatures becomes quickly evident, and the audience learns that Narwhal the Narwhal is a happy-go-lucky, outgoing leader kind of character, whereas Jelly the Jellyfish is more cautiously realistic and inquisitive, but ultimately doesn't mind tagging along to whatever Narwhal is getting up to. After the characters familiarize themselves with each other and become friends, the first story ends, and the fun fact page pops up, and it separates that first story from the second story. The second story involves Narwhal creating a pod of diverse sea creature friends. As Narwhal goes around with Jelly, asking other creatures to join, Jelly becomes increasingly upset because he was never technically asked by Narwhal to join the pod, and it bothers him more and more and more, which with every friend that is added to the pod, Jelly becomes more upset. Narwhal thinks that it was mutually assumed that they were making this pod together, so Narwhal never asked Jelly to be part of the pod. So this leads me into my direct quote here, where when Jelly has had enough and everyone else has joined the pod, but Jelly still hasn't been asked, he explodes and he says, "Narwhal, aren't you going to ask me to join?" And in our picture, we can totally see how his V-shaped eyebrows are making him really upset. He has a little bit of frustration coming off him, shown by those lines coming off his head. And his friends there, the shark and the turtle, they're startled. They're really startled. So I really like this situation because it really explores a diverse amount of emotions. This moment is explosive, and in my opinion, it could be classified as the biggest climactic problem that needs a resolution throughout the entirety of this book. This scene has a lot going on in it. Well, Jelly's clearly upset. Like I mentioned, he has that V-shaped eyebrow going on. He loses control with an outburst, yelling at his friends. And the other sea creature friends are startled, meaning that they didn't notice prior to the outburst how Jelly was feeling. Narwhal realizes that there must be a miscommunication going on this entire time, and he explains his perspective to his friend Jelly, explaining that he didn't mean to leave him out, and in fact he wants him to be part of the pod, so he asks him, and Jelly accepts. I like this part of the book because, like I mentioned, it outlines a lot of emotions, but it also translates directly to how children in this age range can deal with their emotion. Children in this range may sometimes experience situations that bother them, and when they remain silent and allow those negative feelings to build up, they'll eventually outburst. This provides a third person perspective, allowing young readers to understand that it doesn't need to escalate to this point, and it can be avoided if you just communicate how you feel and think about a situation. This can help students with SEL, social emotional learning. No one wants to yell at their friends, but it's hard to communicate your feelings sometimes, and sometimes it comes out when emotion builds up. So in the third story, it involves Narwhal and Jelly using their imaginations to look into a blank book, and they project their own ideas upon the blank pages, and they form the story with their imaginations. This third story, just like the first, are relatively nice and gentle versus the second story that examines some intense emotions between Jelly and his friends. I think the structure of this book was crafted like this on purpose, and I commend the author for doing this because it's easier, especially for younger children, to ease into a tough situation like the explosive situation we found in story 2, and then soften the intensity again with a fun story utilizing imagination like in story 3. So as far as the visuals go, it's evident that someone hand drew these characters and these shenanigans that they're getting up to. So this book does not use a wide variety of color. Instead, the color palette includes blues and grays, black for the outlines, and an occasional pop of color such as yellow, like on the waffle or on the fact page. It had some yellow on there as well. It just depends on the page and what's happening. In general, the color scheme sticks with the blue and gray colors. This at first was not extremely engaging to me, but I realized it allowed me to focus on the nuanced details of the facial expressions without the vibrant, flashy distractions in the background of the pictures. The illustrations are boxed up in a graphic novel type of way most of the time, but there are definitely pages that allow the color in the scene to spread from page to page. A good example is like when Jelly outbursts, the image spreads across the whole 2 pages. To show the fullness and the out-of-control nature of his emotion. When Jelly is talked down by Narwhal and the miscommunication is addressed, it presents Jelly in a box where he's containing himself again, and he's understanding the situation and how it got out of hand. So the use of framing works really well in this specific situation and shows up throughout the book occasionally. So as far as strengths and weaknesses, one of the main strengths of this book is the diverse range of emotions that are used. While Narwhal is pretty much consistently happy and chipper, Jelly experiences a roller coaster of emotions, all exhibited through his facial expressions and not so much through the text itself. This factor alone gives me the confidence to say that this book is definitely age appropriate because students in this age range are learning nonverbal communication skills through facial expressions and body language. Though they may not be consciously realizing it, they are definitely learning those skills. Another one of the biggest strengths of this book is the lessons that it teaches through the stories. The themed lessons that can be derived from these include like accepting others and their differences, keeping open communication to understand and be understood, the idea that good friends care about each other, the fact that sharing is kind, and that imagination is limitless, and the idea that beings, as in people, or in this case the jellyfish and narwhal, have the power to control the narrative in their real lives and when imagining. At first, I felt as though the color scheme was a weakness of this book, but I rescind that opinion. I don't think it's a weakness. As I mentioned, the contained color scheme allows focus on other details of the book, and it doesn't overwhelm the visual experience because of it. So I think that the colors were pretty good. So the language in this book is slightly to moderately more advanced than a second grader would be comfortable with. This is one of the reasons this book can appeal to older students in 4th or 5th grade. There are several instances where puns occur and play on words happen, which an older student would have no trouble understanding. I think overall this book is definitely age appropriate for 2nd through about 5th graders. With that said, the level of ease to read would increase as the book was offered to older students. This might be a main course book for a 2nd or a 3rd grader versus a 4th or 5th grader teacher that might just pick up this book for a fun, light read. In both instances, however, the students would benefit from reading this book. There are various types of sea creatures that are involved in this book, and as far as using this book in my classroom, that's one of the things that I would sort of focus on if I was going to do an activity with it. First, I would like to say that if I did read this book to my class, it would be something fun, but I would like to try to attach something relevant to it, because as fun as this book is, I think the main meat and potatoes of the whole thing comes from the facts that are provided. The stories are fun, but learning about the facts of the ocean animals and being exposed to those ocean animals is really important too. So again, there are various types of sea creatures that are introduced visually in this book, and as an activity, I would have the students pick one of the sea creatures that shows up in the book, and whether it's the narwhal or the jellyfish, the pufferfish, the shark, crab, turtle, I would have them do research on that animal. They could read an additional book and learn facts regarding that animal, and from there, they would write up either a journal entry or a research paper, depending on the age range of the students and how involved the assignment in my classroom was at that time. I would have these students draw their sea creatures and encourage them to add speech bubbles and make them use their imagination and think about what a sea creature like that would say if it could talk. For older students, they could create their own comic using like 6 to 10 blank comic frames. Besides that, that's my overall review of the book, Narwhal, Unicorn of the Sea, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.